Welcome to Steph's podcast. Thank you so much for listening in every single week. As you guys know, I have a different guest who will come on the show and talk about all things ADU, all things multifamily, all things real estate investment strategies. And I'm very selective of who I have on. These are very highly vetted individuals, highly experienced people who have a lot of knowledge and a lot of value to bring to you guys every single week. If you have someone who you think might be a good fit for the show, make sure you guys reach out to me. And another way to stay connected, I know that some of you guys are listening in every single week on the podcast, and you may not know that I do have my active YouTube channel where I'm always sharing other sorts of tips and tricks on what I'm actively doing on myself as an ADU strategist and consultant and investor. And then also, make sure you guys reach out and follow me on Instagram, Steph Sells ADU. I constantly have different content on there showcasing a lot of what the strategies that we're talking about on this podcast, whether it's midterm, ADUs, multifamily, acquisitions, you name it, just property management, mom life, all the things. Make sure you guys follow me on there so we can continue to cultivate this relationship. Now, enjoy this episode, and I'll see you on the next one. Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode. This is Steph's podcast. As you guys know, my podcast is about all things ADU and all things real estate investing. And today is episode 82. I have a special guest who is my first time seeing him face to face, but I feel like we've been knowing each other because in the ADU world and in the real estate space, it's very small. It's a very small world where everybody tends to know each other, and we have a couple mutual friends in common. So I feel like this will be a great episode, very informative, but also, the connection and the synergy is there. So I really emphasize that in each podcast because the people that I have are people that I obviously would like to have a conversation with. So I'm very intentional about the episodes, and today's no different. So we have a lot of conversations around ADU legislation, since things are moving very quickly. We just want to kind of recap where we're at. What are some of the trends that we're seeing, hacks, strategies, creative financing solutions for people wanting to build, whether it's in residential or multifamily. We're also going to talk about some multifamily strategies. And then I'm going to hand it off to Babak so that he can tell us a little bit about who he is, his company, which does a whole lot of ADU resourcing and consulting. And then, go from there and start this conversation. Thank you so much for being here.
Fantastic, thank you. I'm very excited, and like you said, this is the first time we're talking, but I feel like we've communicated on messages, and I always love sharing your posts because
Yeah, and I
it's so
gotta say,
informative.
I love your marketing, by the way. So the listeners, if you guys can follow him on Instagram, I think that was one of the things that I really paid attention to. Besides the fact that we know people in common, but your marketing is great on social media, by the way.
Thank you, thank you. We have a great team that does all that.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, and when you talk about marketing, I think that's important because in this space, like I think it was my own experiences that I first started with, like the pain points that then we wanted to like solve, right? So when we first got into the space, like we've been into real estate, other real estate startups, LA focused, but then
Mhm.
when we started doing ADUs, we were like, man, this is like it's a very fragmented industry as far as like the supply, the information from permitting to construction. So our goal was to actually like compartmentalize all those pain points and then provide answers. That's what like LADU is. So LADU is like just a vertically integrated solution for anything and everything ADUs. And it first starts with education to the homeowner. You
Right.
know, when you think about like the housing crisis, for example, crisis, it's it is like unique to California right now. I think any other in the country because California's Prop 13, right? So
Right.
not just Prop 13, like that's never going away. People talk about it when it's a hot topic, but if there's one thing we can like universally agree on politically, it's Prop 13, right? No one wants to pay more property taxes. Number two is it was always so cumbersome to develop and get stuff permitted for like the last 30 to 40 years. Okay. So while the city and the state is everyone's favorite punching bag. I kind of want to give them credit. It's like the state has been so progressive with like their laws and like and what they want to do to solve this or get permitting um expedited and get builders incentivized. Like it's pretty good. Like you got to give them credit, and they've also been very iterative. Every year, like you're seeing them like a problem comes up, then they draft legislation to solve for that problem, right? And for the last 5 years, you're just seeing this like change. Every year something's coming up, then they pass a law that addresses it. So that's like that progressiveness, that movement by them has been a big catalyst. Okay. Um, I think so. I find that pretty fascinating. But then if you scale back out, the housing problem isn't something that could be solved with like a public-private partnership, right? The developers are focusing on like bigger projects, for example.
Mhm.
The public entities that like to participate, they only have so many funds they can allocate to solve this. So
Right.
the one party that really needs to be integrated into the solution are current homeowners uh, of these properties that have like they've owned them for a long time. We looked at like the record. It's like the equity, right? So there's
Mhm.
$3.5 trillion of home equity in California alone. There's 1.5 trillion just in LA County. So we parsed it out. We go, oh my God, like what is all this equity doing? It's not being utilized.
Mhm.
And then when we looked at, it, we go, there's 1 million homes in LA County that are over 5,000 square feet. They have land. That's, there's 1,000 square foot home on a 5,000 square foot lot. There's over
Right.
1 million homes in LA County that have room to build an ADU and the equity. So the state was like, how do we get those people incentivized to participate? Because the public partnership can only take it so far, right?
Right.
And that's the part where it's like, okay, if they're the key component to solving housing or addressing the housing needs and doing it, like we need to educate them en masse. How do we get in front of the homeowner and let them know what they can do? Because there's a clear value prop, right?
Mhm.
What they can do, why they should do it, and then tell them how they should do it. And that was like our like light that went off. It was like, let's get in front of the homeowner and let them know exactly what we can do. So we decided it's like it's a big cost, but like let's just provide free site visits. Right. One of my pain points
Mhm.
was like I would call somebody like, "What can I do on my property?" You type an address, but there's like after 10 minutes they didn't want like okay, we're done. It's like you couldn't get that service or build
Right.
that trust. If you're asking a homeowner to make the biggest financial decision that they could, your home is your biggest net worth, right? For majority of
Mhm.
homeowners.
Mhm.
So it's like if you're asking them to make a decision that's a high cost of failure, it's like if they can't make it within 5-10 minutes, it's like something they have to like warm up to. They have to trust. They have to understand the process and know what they're getting into. Um, so I think doubling down on the education has been like was really like boosted our business and like allowed us to get in front of people and give them that information they need to make a well informed decision.
Yeah, education is huge because I've talked about it on this podcast several times. Many people will go based off of what they see other people doing, and they assume that it's a very streamlined process, but it's not. There's very different components that come together, and when you decide as a homeowner to take on this role of having an ADU in your backyard or converting space or building from the ground up, you're essentially becoming a small developer yourself, right? And you don't
Yep.
even realize that you're taking on this role of a homeowner slash developer who now also needs to understand architectural plans, construction process, financing, management. You're taking on 5, 6 different hats that you didn't even know you were signing up for because you're looking at the end goal, which is, oh, I can rent out my garage for 2,500 or 3,000 a month, and that's going to help me offset these other expenses. But you don't think about the time frame that it takes, right? We're
Mhm.
talking 10 to 12 months, sometimes even longer. So patience is key. And that's assuming everyone is on the same,
Yep.
wavelength and everybody's like on track communicating well. So yeah, one of the things that you and I were talking about offline is exactly that, right? Once people are educated and you understand everyone's role and you understand the process, that empowers you to now know how to communicate with the architect, how to communicate with the contractor, and how to set these expectations with everyone's role. You don't have to know exactly how everybody's role works, but understanding, what their role does in this process is great. Like, let people do what they do, but understand, what they're actually accomplishing for you throughout the journey. And so you were talking about the bus stop. um, and the different bus stops that people can sort of get off on and get back on if needed. So, do you want to tell people a little bit about that bus stop mentality?
Yeah, so when people ask like LADU, what do we do? It's like we're not we're not just a construction company, we're not just a financing company, we're not just like a design permit company, we're not just like any of the things component. I like to tell people like maybe we're like a bus stops on a route where we can provide all these different services, and then homeowners can like hop on and off whichever stop they need help with. They don't have to like stay on for the whole ride. So we have some customers that just use us, want to work with us for design and permit because they have their own contractor, for example. We have some customers that need help with lending, so they'll come to us for like lending options. We
Mhm.
have some customers who have their permit from like another architect. Now they need a contractor. So we provide all the solutions. And then homeowners can utilize them. And then some customers just trust us from the beginning and then go through our whole process. So we like to provide that transparency, but also that optionality for everyone. Because listen, there's a lot of contractors in LA. And if a lot of times contractors come from like referrals. So homeowners will come to us. I have a contractor I want to work with because I trust them.
Right,
It's a high trust business, and they're like, okay, but I don't know. He told me I got to get permits. Okay, so then they find us for permits and design.
right.
So we try to we understand the market and want to work with people in the best way that they prefer, um, and having that flexibility, I think, has been key.
Yeah, I think being super flexible in like what you guys offer is huge because people then feel like they trust you guys and they know, okay, well, I only need help with this part of the process. I got everything else on this end covered. Because I see a lot of the same, right? It is very referral based. People have to trust who they're going to work with for the next 6 months to a year, if not longer. So sometimes people do have their own architect and they just need a contractor, or vice versa. Or, I talked to one yesterday. He had a feasibility already. So he's like, I don't need that, but let's talk about the next phase, which would be design. And I'm like, okay. So just meeting people where they're at. The before, during, and after, right? Because before is a lot of the knowledge base, educating yourself about the process. And then through the journey of the ADU, you learn a lot as well. And then after, like, what does the maintenance for the ADU look like, especially if
Mhm.
it's a rental? Like I was telling you earlier, the screening process, finding a tenant, whether it's midterm or long term, figuring out what your exit strategy is. So yeah, all those components are super important. But I'm glad that you are also very focused in LA City because that's its own beast. So one of the things that we were going to also talk about was legislation. And you kind of touched on it. I agree with you. I think that the state has been doing an amazing job as far as adapting to change, and they hear the feedback, and organizations like YIMBY and Casita Coalition and a few other organizations are really helping push legislation to make certain adjustments and modifications to make things easier. At the end of the day, even though there's been a lot of legislation update and a lot of legislative activity, it's all for the good of homeowners and being able to leverage their current asset in many different ways and expedite the process. And so I think the state is doing as much as they can. Cities are also keeping up as much as they can. And there has to be a place where we can all sort of kind of figure this out together, right? Through consultants, the people working for the city, the state as well. And then now the homeowner who's also playing a role in all of this. But with legislation, we wanted to touch on, I think there's two we'll start on, and I think the first one would be AB 2533. What has been sort of what are you gauging in the marketplace right now that with AB 2533? And maybe you can tell people a little bit about what that is. I've talked about it in the past, but just a quick recap. What is AB 2533? And are you guys actively helping clients with that right now?
Yeah, so this is actually one of my most favorite ones,
Me
because
too.
it's not
This is where it
something.
all started.
Yes, it's this is the one where it's like people are, um, when they come through for this, and AB 2533, for the people out there that don't know, it's a state law that got passed to streamline permitting any unpermitted dwelling units that are on your property. Now, back to what I said at the top was like permitting has been so difficult and cumbersome over the last 40 years that in some of these neighborhoods, people just like built. Enforcement was lacking; they weren't checking, so people just built like ADUs or they converted it. Again, LA homeowners are very resourceful, right? So,
Right.
some of the most resourceful like people in the country. So they built existing dwelling units that were not permitted, and enforcement was lacking. But to the tune of, I think the estimate is 50,000 unpermitted ADUs in LA City, right? So that's its own, like they call it, addressable market TAM. Now the state passed a law where it's like, okay, how do we make this easier for the municipalities to like get this stuff permitted? I think a couple of the issues was like liability, and the second thing was fees, right? So the state and like meeting new code. So the state was like, okay, why don't we'll give you a guideline to follow, just to meet the health and safety checklist. So
Right.
we provide this checklist of that health and safety code. Doesn't have to be the current code. But these things, some of these were built 15, 20, 30 years ago. It's hard, it's too cost prohibitive to bring them up to new code. But
Hmm.
at the same time, they don't want to like scare people away, but they want people to come to the table to get their stuff permitted. So
Hmm.
I think that's fascinating. It's like limiting the scope of work that needs to be done. You can't deny it anymore as well. So they just have to give some corrections to get them done and grandfather a lot of these unpermitted dwelling units. Now, the people that are coming to us are high intention, right? They either have a code enforcement case, the neighbors turned them in, and so forth. So when we talk about this, it's like it's not the best introduction to a homeowner because they're naturally upset when they come because code enforcement. Oh, my tenant did this, but what we try to tell them is like, this is an opportunity that's fairly new, as of January 25. And then the price of what you're doing now far outweighs the cost if you don't do it
Far outweighs.
in
Hmm.
the future, right? Like, and then they go, "What do you mean?" I go, "Well, are you using this as a rental for income?" Yeah. Okay. Well, did you know, for example, we've seen now cases where if you are a tenant, you can stop paying rent. You don't even have to pay the rent. Not only that, you can actually get the last 2 years of rent you paid back from the homeowner. They go, and so this kind of like shocks them. It's like they didn't know that liability existed. Second thing, like insurance, if something were to happen to that unit, it's unpermitted. Insurance is a hot button issue right now. They're not going to cover it, right?
Hmm.
So it's like the price of whatever that is now is far, the cost will far outweigh that the current cost of a
Yeah, I
current
think the
price to do it.
price and also the time frame, because here's what it would look like if without AB 2533. So before this legislation, if you had, which a lot of people had, garage conversions not permitted. I mean, that's
So,
really why I think ADUs even became a thing, because prior to legislation passing in 2017, there were so many garage conversions being built illegally that the state was literally worried about the habitability of these units because they weren't being built up to code. So then that's when, the talks about ADUs becoming a thing and legislation passing in 2017, that's how it happened. But prior to AB 2533 happening, I used to have a lot of clients who would come and say, "Hey, I have a unit, it's not permitted. Should I go to the city and like start the process and convert it the right way?" And most of the time, my advice was
mm,
like, "No, you're going
no,
to open
yeah,
up a can of worms. You do not want to do that unless your neighbor has called on you or you've gotten some sort of notice to get it taken care of. Don't do anything. Like, leave it as is." And so now with AB 2533, if you built a non-permitted ADU without permits, without illegally, basically, prior to 2020, then all you have to do now is go through health and safety checklists, right? You have to make sure that you check off healthy and safety concerns and not building. That's the biggest piece, because before, if you went to the city and you said, hey, I have a non-permitted structure, you basically had to tear the whole thing down and start the entire process from beginning to end. So it was going to cost you the same thing that it would to build a new one or convert a new ADU. And so now you're able to kind of bypass the building code standards and just go through health and safety, which means it cuts down time, cost, and ultimately that also saves you even more money. But and on top of that, the benefits are endless, because now that your unit will be converted legally, it'll have its own address, it will operate as its own unit, it'll have a lot of forced appreciation on the actual asset itself, and you can leverage that equity that you basically built for yourself for future assets or purchases and growing your portfolio business. So yeah, I mean, I'm all about AB 2533, especially for a lot of Latinos. My dad built, I want to say, 2.5 ADUs
Yeah.
illegally. He just kept
Yeah.
adding to the house. We
Yeah.
had our house originally was a 2-1, and he did another bathroom illegally. He added another bathroom and another bathroom, and sorry, another bedroom and another bedroom by your Theo contractor who wasn't licensed either. And so it was definitely not built up to code. And I know that a lot of us, did that and took that route. And now you have the opportunity to actually make it right at a very
Yep.
small fraction of the true cost of what it would cost to actually build one. So if you have an unpermitted structure, don't be afraid now to reach out to the city, because now this state law says, hey, if you built it before 2020, we're actually going to let you legalize it the right way, as long as you can um, you know, uh, to meet those safety and health requirements. So it's huge,
Yeah.
because it gives a lot of opportunity to people to do it the right way. Now, what would you say the cost associated with that would be? Obviously, you're not paying for construction; the site's already there. But what would be, you would think, like maybe for a garage conversion, what would be the average cost for something like that?
So we've done about, I think, almost like 60 of these so far in this first like 5 months of this year, as when the law went into effect. And you have to you still got to submit the plans, blueprints, structural drawings, a Title 24. You still got to submit all those things.
Hmm.
And then the cost depends. If you are detached, unpermitted, it's like we charge 8,000 for that. If it's attached, you still got to do the as built and provide structural for the entire building. And there's like a little bit nominal charge more for that. So we charge around 8 to 10,000 to do this, and then we'll do all the correspondence with the city. We do the submittals, any revisions that are required,
Hmm.
uh, get them through plan check, get all the clearances, and after the plan check's approved, then we'll do like a little pre-inspection walkthrough with building and safety, and then we kind of advocate for the homeowner, so make sure that the building and safety inspector is sticking to the health and safety code, um, and then provide them with corrections based on that. And we'll provide, even before the whole process, we'll come out there during a site visit and walk through that health and safety code to make sure there's nothing like onerous or cumbersome that can um, deter them from doing this. But they have to have an advocate. We go through still the plan check process through the city.
Right.
Um, but then at the end of the day, if you have this, as like you said, you're forced appreciation, because now you have a permitted square footage you're adding to the
Mhm,
property.
mhm.
And then if there's whatever corrections to come up, you get them done, and then you get your COO. So it's tedious, but it's much easier than it was
Right. I mean, the fact
before
that you
this
have
year.
it's tedious, but the fact that you even have the opportunity to make it
Yep.
right without, so many expenses and time frame being
Yep.
accrued is a win. It's a
Yep.
win. So yeah, I think that's a good one that we'll be focusing on. Another one I'm specifically focusing on is SB 1211. And I'm targeting a lot of 8 to 20 unit buildings that have the opportunity to build another 8, right? How are you guys sort of implementing SB 1211? Have you worked on any this year so far?
Yeah, so we've had a few of those this year where homeowners, multifamily property owners come to us, and then we'll go out there, we'll assess their lot. It is limited to the number of existing units that are on the
Right.
property. So sometimes like we'll get somebody with a fourplex. They say, "Hey, I want to add 8 more units in the back." I go, well, "Okay, let's so let's slow down. You can add 4, but you can add up to 8 new ADUs on the property on SB 1211." And that's another fascinating one where it's like maximizing density. Before this year, it was maximum of 2 units, right?
Mhm,
So they
mhm.
increased that 400%. Now you can add up to 8. It's path dependent on the lot and the number of units on the building. Um, so that's been another fascinating one that's exciting. We tried to make that also like a programmatic approach where it's like we have these set plans that the multifamily
Mm.
investors can like choose from, and then the 90% of them will apply to their property, and that's been
Yeah, that's
exciting.
good because I mean, they have to be detached, so it's very easy to just have some pre-approved or preset plans in motion. And if we're talking multifamily, for the most part, it's always for a rental, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of these units and the plans that you already have set in place are probably very functional to, your average renters and kind of what they're looking for, and those plans are already sort of created with that thought in mind. And so it makes it a lot smoother too for these investors to be able to just add so many at scale and rent them out, whether it's midterm or long term.
Yep.
But that's a good one. And you and I were also talking offline, like for some of the people or investors who had a duplex or a fourplex and built 2 ADUs a couple years ago, and now you have these legislation laws that are making it even better, like SB 1211. You could also consider, 1031 exchanging that to something that does have the potential to add another 8 units. That's just a thought, to keep in mind if you have current assets that maybe don't have that, it's not as feasible to add as many units, then it may be worth looking at buying some multifamily. I mean, multifamily right now is a great opportunity. It really is. On top of that,
It is the cap rates are there's a disconnect right now between single family and multifamily. You're seeing like I think the other day I saw multifamily trade for like 8 units trade for like 1.5 million, and then the single family across the street sold for like 1 million.
mhm,
so, so cap rates disconnected there. So it is, I think, multifamily is an opportunity right now. If it has enough room to add
right.
units, investors, buyers should be looking into that. And if they can 1031 a previous property, that's something to look into.
Yeah, and you're not going to see a whole lot of 8 units that have the ability to add another 8. We're in a very dense area, so that's a gem if you can find that. But if you have a fourplex and you're able to add 2 to 4 and it's feasible, then that's an option. If you have 6, 7 units, it may be worth considering it. And so, yeah, I think that's a really good one in multifamily. And that's additional to the 25% density rule. So,
Yeah.
so you can convert 25% of the existing structure plus add another 8 or
Do
however
you
many.
do you feel this earthquake?
No.
I'm in Santa Monica right now. It never gets old when the earthquake comes through. So I just felt
Wow.
so I'm just
No.
like, is this a big one? Is this the big one? No, okay.
Oh, Lord.
Suddenly saw my eyes. I was like, holy, okay. I'm okay now. All
Are
right.
you good? Are you okay?
This is the first for your podcast. Earthquake
Let's,
happening.
oh my God. Let's find out how much or how. Well, I'll look it up right now. Let's give it a minute
Yeah,
to update. But wow. Yeah, interesting times, right? That we're currently living in. Earthquakes, we got, the fires. Are you guys also, what's that been like? Have you been helping people in Altadena, Pacific Palisades?
that's a great segment. Yes, we have. Altadena, I think it has been more not easier, but like they're moving faster. I think as far as like
Mhm.
the homeowners ready to make decisions and not just like fire rebuilds, but like even homes that weren't. We have one client currently now whose home was right on like the house next to it was burned down. Houses around it were burned down, but they were the first house closest to the fire. Um, but it might as well have been burned down because the smoke was so bad. They got to take it down to the studs anyways. So
Wow.
then we have some other ones that we just started getting in permitting process. So yeah, I mean Altadena, Palisades has been a little slower. I think there's more like insurance and Um, other things involved in there as far as cleanup. Just a few of those in there, but mostly Altadena are the ones that are quicker to move right now that we have in process.
Yeah, I think same. I've been seeing the same thing. You can definitely expedite the process with Altadena. Pacific Palisades is its own world for sure, and a lot of cleanup needs to happen. But with well, I was talking to somebody about soils test reports, and there was this agent who sold a house to clients in San Diego, and he um, he obviously he knows that ADUs are allowed, and he probably told his clients, yeah, you can build an ADU. And they bought it because they were thinking of building two on there, and probably even more because San Diego has the bonus ADU rule, so they could have done more. But so they bought the house, they close escrow, they get a feasibility done, and then the soils test happens and it didn't pass.
Yeah.
And now it's like, oh shit. Like, okay, they bought the house. Now they're thinking of selling it, but it wouldn't make sense to sell it.
Uh,
You're better off trying to figure out how to get the soils test to actually go through and pass. And so it made me think of the cleanup that needs to happen in Altadena and Pacific Palisades, and just the process and the time
mhm.
frame that it's going to take for all that cleanup to happen. And it also made me realize, like, if you're an investor looking to buy a home with the intention of building an ADU, during your due diligence period, when you're scheduling your home inspection and your termite and sewer, you probably need not just a feasibility, but maybe
The
even a
soil,
soils, you know?
the soil test. Yeah, I mean they're expensive, but they're worth it.
I mean, they're
So
expensive, but they're definitely worth it if you're going to buy it
they're,
with that intention. Because now they're in a situation where if the test didn't pass, well, why didn't it pass, and how much is it
yeah,
going to cost to actually get it? And that's even more expensive than the test itself, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
Especially I think it's a lot of hillside projects or any in those, they will need that
But what's crazy is
certainly.
there's a couple ADUs that were built on that track, like in that same neighborhood.
Mhm.
But for some reason theirs didn't pass, and so they're running across that hurdle right now. And I'm actually going to do a video on Instagram about it because I offer feasibilities for realtors and for clients, even if they're not in escrow with me. If they're in escrow period and they're buying it with the intention of building, I'm offering the feasibility. But even the feasibility won't cut it. You've really got to get someone to go out there and test the soil.
Yeah, there's some things you just have to do. Like what are some other reports you think are necessary or you think you would
Well, that
recommend?
one I learned is actually
Yeah.
necessary if you're thinking of building more than one for sure, or anything at all. If your goal is that like to buy the property because you're going to maximize it and build on it, yeah, do all the tests that you can. So, I mean, obviously, a home inspection is always helpful.
Mm.
Feasibility is a must if you're going to build. But other than that, I mean, the soil, I don't know what other sort of testing, but
Testing soil,
structural.
but also the survey is always fascinating. Like
That
when we did the
too, yeah.
boundary survey, what comes from that? you know, so that especially if you want to maximize, you're trying to get to the setback as much as possible, or
Yeah, and it might
maximize.
sound like a lot, but if you can schedule it all in one day, like I've scheduled the
Yeah,
feasibility, the termite, the home inspection, and sewer inspection all in one day. Like
well, that's
get
that's
get
that's
everybody
why
out.
you're that's why you're one of the best.
Yeah, just use your time wisely. Then you get all the reports back around the same time, and then you can negotiate the terms, right?
Yeah.
Renegotiate terms before you close escrow or cancel if it doesn't make sense. But yeah, I think that was an important one. So I was like, oh, let me make a video on that because it's not cheap to
Mhm.
come across an issue like that, and especially if you closed on the property already. So but
It's good to
maybe,
know.
if it's multifamily, maybe structural would be some tests or some inspections I would do if you're converting like undertuck parking or, just yeah, converting space within the structure.
Seismic retrofitting, sometimes those
That
requirements
for
are
sure.
still in place.
Well, that
Uh,
one I think for the most part we have to do, right? So
Yep.
yeah, that for sure.
But the seismic one of our partners we work with is like they will recommend if somebody comes in for seismic that you can actually use that opportunity to build like an attached ADU. and you kind of kill two birds with one stone.
Yeah,
So
I
they
like that.
specialize in that. So that's one part. Something's older, like you know, older multifamily buildings in LA
Mhm.
County.
Yeah.
Great stuff. Um,
Yeah,
um,
amazing. Well, I mean, I feel like, there's just a lot of things happening in our market where there's always room for opportunity. You just have to be around the right people. Pick one strategy and go with that. Don't try to do it all residential, multifamily, then and try to just do three things at once. Just focus on one. If it's residential, look at a specific property over and over with the same sort of characteristics and, kind of rinse and repeat that process, which typically it's, your corner lots with alley access, avoiding power lines. If it's a multifamily, maybe having undertook parking is easier than, having to convert existing or doing a detached. But yeah, I mean, overall, I think we're in a great type of market. One of the things that I think we should finish off with is maybe some of the creative financing options because, like I was telling you offline, with residential, if you don't have equity, which apparently, all of LA has equity that they're sitting on, they just don't know how to use it. But if you don't, if you just bought the property within the last year, you probably haven't built enough equity to finance a project. What are some of those creative solutions that you guys are helping them with? Like what types of financing?
that's a great question, and even like what you just said, even if you just recently bought the property, there's even options for you there. But I think first thing is like you bring it back, right? That's like the decision making. If there's one piece of advice I can give homeowners or anyone buying a property looking to do ADUs is bifurcate the decision making process, split it up. Oftentimes, the first question we always get is, how much is it going to cost to build this ADU or
Right.
build what I want? And then the answer we always say is, it depends, right?
Mhm.
It
It really
depends.
depends.
Because if you go to a lender and you want to borrow money first, and if you don't have like your permits ready or you don't know what you want to build, they're like, they'll come back to us when you're ready, right? If you go to a contractor, and most of the time they're like, are you ready to build? Well, that top of the funnel part is always like very, because that project may not get permitted for 6 months, 9 months, a
Hmm.
long time before they can actually start. So we
Right.
always say start first with design and permits. Let's start that process. It's a much lower ask to start for a homeowner because we get them involved, and then during that design process, you're actually designing towards a budget, right? And then by the time you get towards a budget, the permit approval is when we encourage them to start getting estimates. Because a lot of people don't know is like once you start the process and you get your permits approved, then you actually have time to start construction a year or 2 years before you do
Mhm.
it. So start that process as soon as possible to get your permits approved. Because once your permits are close to approval and you have multiple estimates, that's when you can then take that to a lender and then they'll actually have a better scope of work that they can underwrite. If you wanted to create a financing, one of the best things you can think about is like, what's the potential rental income of this property? Where some of our lender partners, they'll finance a project 100% if they know what the future rental income of that of what you're building is. They say, okay, we can project out, say, 2,500 for a two-bedroom, and we'll let you borrow, we'll finance it 100% for you. And then they'll take a percentage of the rent, and then you keep the net of that, right?
Mm.
So that when we say like bifurcate the process, start with design and permits. During the design and permits, we can guide you through to a certain budget. But then while you're getting the permit process, we will start collecting all the different lending options based on your specific project. In addition, it limits change order fees because now you know where everything's going to be. You should know, like for the most part now, when a contractor sees a permit set, like what they're going to build and how they're going to build it and how long it'll take. So you get a much more accurate estimate as well. In the financing space, it's very fascinating because you have your regular HELOCs everyone has access to, but now
Right.
you have if you're buying a home, for example, FHA will underwrite. Um, they'll underwrite you for future rental income of if it's not even built, and you say, I want to add an ADU here, they'll help underwrite you based on that future as income for you, right?
Right.
So that's fascinating. There's a lot of second lien positions that are now
Hmm.
coming to the market.
And then you got the
specialist.
HELOC renovation loans too.
Yeah, the HELOC renovation loans. And then the last one is this one's pretty fascinating to me because they're called home equity investments. And every time people hear this, they're kind of like, oh, I don't know, that's crazy. What is it? It's like, well, it's a home equity investment. There's companies out there now that'll provide you um, capital, and then but it's not a loan. There's no interest on it. There's no payments on it. So how does that work? Well, it could be it's a higher cost of capital than some other resources, but it's not debt. There's not necessarily a liability to it. You can't like foreclose on it right now. But if you want to access 250,000 in a property, up to 250 or up to 500, you can now take that capital. And if you're using it to create value in the property and income, and you
Mhm.
don't have to make any payments on that for 10 years, or that might make sense, right? For a lot of homeowners, especially with like LA has a lot of people who are like um, older, like I think
A lot of boom.
70
Hmm.
older homeowners, right? So they don't necessarily have the income anymore, but they have the equity. So we say house rich, cash poor, right?
Yes,
So we
yes.
always say it's like there's literally like this equity in your property. How do you access it? So home equity agreement is an option for some of those people, but there's no interest or loan payments on it, but they will take a percentage of future appreciation. They won't participate in the appreciation that you're creating with an ADU, but they'll take a percentage of that. So everyone has to like do their own research because there's a lot of options, right? So if you want to build an ADU, there's a lot of options out there to access equity or capital to build it. You just have to pick the right one that's best for you in
Yeah,
this
you
instance.
get creative and have a strategic plan on how you're going to access those funds and when you're going to access them because I usually will start with the financing and slash design phase first. But let's say they're going to tap into their HELOC. I usually encourage them to actually pay for the plans up front. And if they can finance that with their own money, like cash or credit cards with 0% interest rate, buy that first. And then once you're past permits, then you can have the HELOC kick in for the construction process. And even then, you're kind of paying as you go, right? So you're utilizing the HELOC as you are going through the different inspection periods throughout the construction process. So you're not paying it all up front. You're kind of just using it as a credit card as each phase is being completed. And then, refinance the property or get it reevaluated actually
Mhm.
after the build out and tap into that equity that you just created yourself and maybe even pay off that HELOC a lot sooner than you had planned. But like you said, most people, a lot of baby boomers, they have the money. That's that equity. They don't have the actual cash for it, and they would be okay with not having to make a payment for the next 10 years, and probably even not cash flow in the next 10 years because it's more of like their retirement. And probably where they're going to live too. Like I said, I see a lot of baby boomers downsizing to the ADU and then either renting out the main home or having their kids or family live in the main home. And now the ADU sort of becomes this co-living, assisted living type of space for them, rather than sending off your parents to an assisted living and paying 8,000 a month. Build them the ADU. You're going to pay less than 8,000 a month in financing it, and and have them live there. So it just creates, like I said, a lot of flexibility. It can be a rental now and it can be assisted living later in your life. It just kind of depends on where you're at in your journey. So, like you said earlier, every single property is different and every single homeowner slash investor is also different because everybody's needs are in different phases of their life. So our job is to kind of help them navigate through it all and then offer solutions, right? Creative solutions.
That's right. That's right. Lot of and there's a lot of solutions out there, and a lot of more solutions that I see coming to the market. So
Yes.
there is a clear value prop for homeowners. So just understand like you are creating value. in your property by adding square footage. You are creating potential a source of income if you choose to rent it out. So the value prop is there, and that's what again back to top. It's like education, like know what you can do it and what you can do and how you can do it, so you can make the best decision. A lot of people will get sticker shock. They're like, "Oh, 200,000 to build an ADU." Like, wait, well, that's really maybe like 1,200 a month, and you can rent it out for 2,500 a month. Like, does that make sense? So,
And your property value will probably double in the next 12 to 14 months and
yeah,
triple in the next 3 to 5, So the long-term value is there, which is why people really need to see the long-term vision, not just the proposal that you're getting right now for the labor and the cost and the build out right now. Like
yeah,
that's what you're paying for right now. That's the investment that you're making right now so that you could see your ROI in the next year, 3, 5, 10. It's just going to keep appreciating over time because you've added more square footage. So whichever way you look at it, the value prop is there. I think sometimes homeowners just are a bit skeptical because they don't understand the process. And even though 2 to 300,000 is sort of like your average cost for an ADU, it's still a fraction of what you would buy real estate for. If you're building a
yeah,
2-2 for 260,000, let's say, where can you find a 2-2 in Orange County or LA County under 260? You can't even find it under 600,000
yeah.
with an HOA of at least $400 a month, right? So
And
yeah,
it's
the
forced
value,
appreciation.
yeah, yeah,
And you said you just said something very important that we can end with. It's it's difficult to assume homeowners can wear all those different hats, right?
right,
Or to like know all the information, to be like the civil engineer, then be the designer, then be their own lender, and they're almost like their own developer. So that's
right.
again, just to reiterate, like take the initiative, people out there, to understand what you can do, how you can do it, and how much it'll cost, and what the value is afterwards. Do your homework because the value prop is there, but just need to know how specific it is to your use case and property.
Yep. And I always tell homeowners the best way to get started is read the HCD handbook. I'm not even asking you to read the government code because that's too technical.
Yeah,
Just read the HCD handbook and it'll empower you to actually be able to have a conversation with an architect or a contractor about what's allowed on your property. It's also going to give you so much clarity to know like what to ask for and what it is that you want and just empower you. I mean, that's really the first step. And then, you could, I'm actually a member of Casita Coalition. I don't know if you are, but if you aren't, definitely join. It's like $100 for the year, but they do so much for ADU legislation and they have monthly calls where we all talk about everything that we just talked about on this episode, right? Legislation. We talk with different practitioners in different states and different cities and what's working, what's not working, how are we making it better. And it's also open to homeowners. They have like basic ADU 101 courses. So I think as a homeowner, you also need to do your due diligence and not just rely on referrals, right? Like actually knowledge and educate yourself before you make the decision. But the value is there. So it's more about you feeling confident with that knowledge and then reaching out to people like us, which takes me to it's kind of like the last here call to action is how can people reach out to you and yeah, and schedule a call.
yeah. So I'll do you one better. Like we are now, if you're in LA County, you want to get started but don't know where, how, or what to do, like we are providing free site visits. You just go on our homepage,
I would do that. Yeah.
LADU.co. And we don't charge, we don't ask you for all your information. Just type in your address, your name, like how we can contact you, and then we will send one of our architects or engineers to your property to meet with you, do a little walkthrough, create a site plan for you, and just give you some information to start to think about like what and how you can do on your property. I think that's probably the best thing we can do at this point, just to get started. Is like meet with one of our um, architects and engineers on your property to understand like where you can get started and how you can start it.
That's such a good way to learn too. I mean, doing feasibilities and having somebody walk you through your property so they know like what they're looking at. Um, it's great for you to learn. So and the fact that you're doing it for free, I would definitely take you up on that if I had to reach out to you for a feasibility because it's great value add and you I know you'll get all the information that you need. So make sure you guys reach out to him. He has amazing content on social media. Like I said, I'm a huge fan of the marketing that he has going on. So he has a great marketing team, and that's important, right? Which whoever you choose to work with, marketing is very important in our industry, anyone's industry. The way you sort of message your business to other people is very important. So reach out to him. Thank you so much for your time. I'm sure we'll meet in person at some point.
Yep.
But I feel like like we already knew each other through Bill and a few other people. So
Steph, it was a pleasure. Thank you very much. Look forward to connecting soon.
thank you so much. You have a good one. Bye.
Bye, guys.
Hey everyone, thanks for listening. I hope you found this episode informative and helpful. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to reach out to me on Instagram or LinkedIn. I'm always happy to chat about ADUs and help you with your journey, whether it's consulting, acquisitions, management, you name it. Just reach out to me and let's schedule a quick call. And lastly, don't forget to subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss any future episodes. I'll be back next week with another great guest and more insights on all things ADU. Thanks again for listening. I'll see you next time.